Sorry, can everyone hear this?
Can everyone hear it?
No, I didn't want to interrupt it.
Okay,
Oh no!
Thank you,
Okay.
Jen. Yeah.
All right, welcome to American Shade. It's Brittany King again here with another video. And I'm so excited about this episode because we're going to be talking about something that I've been waiting to discuss. Cancel culture versus accountability. And it's on an all-time high, at least cancel culture is. Can we all agree on that? 2020 was a year. So before we get into that, we have a panel of amazing guests with us, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Can each of you give us your name, what you do, and where you stand on the political spectrum if you do stand on it? We'll start with Jess. I just said her name for her.
Hi, my name is Jessray Imberton. I am currently a bartender, but I'm also a mother, and I am practically building a farm from scratch on my own property. So that's what I do. Politically, I would definitely call myself a leftist, but I tend to try to come up with my own ideas on things, not just follow what's been laid out before me, if that makes sense. Did I miss any questions?
Oh, perfect. Perfect.
Okay.
And then I'll just say mine if people don't know. My name is Brittany. I'm a writer, I'm a journalist, and I consider myself an independent.
Hi, I'm Lee. I am a recently retired software developer. Politically, I would say I'm a non-religious progressive independent. I think that about covers everything.
My name is Will Roosh. I'm a high school teacher. And on the political spectrum, I guess I would be more left-leaning, but I'm registered independent, progressive on some things, conservative on some things. I'm pretty politically homeless.
My name is Shindai. I'm a journalist and filmmaker, and I don't really subscribe to political ideologies, I would say.
Awesome. So like I mentioned, cancel culture has spiked, especially now that we are in quarantine and we're spending a lot of time online. And most of that time we're debating each other. Just going down memory lane, these are a few people that were canceled in 2020. So we had actress Lea Michele, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, J.K. Rowling, Ice Cube, Kanye West again, Terry Crews, and Ellen. And there was many more, too many to name. But the thing is our society fundamentally disagrees with what cancel culture actually is and what accountability is. And some people actually say cancel culture is a form of accountability, but others says it does not look like that. Like canceling people is not holding them accountable. So before we get into this discussion, I just want to get a sense of how you guys define cancel culture and accountability, just so we're on equal grounds of each other's point of views.
I think that's tough because when you read off that list, I mean, a lot of those people still have Jimmy Kimmel still has his job. I guess I don't really know how we're defining. I would define it, and I'd look less at the celebrities. I'd look more at the individuals who we don't know, but they lost their jobs for maybe a tweet that says all lives matter, but they lost their jobs and they're not well known. So I would say cancel culture, I would define it as something where you aren't able to earn a living in your traditional ways or something along those lines.
Oh,
I would define it as just,
Go ahead, Jessica.
Go ahead, Lee. Okay, I was just going to say I would define it as being given a collective response based upon something that you did in the past that's basically letting you know that you need to hold yourself accountable or amend for something that's been done in the past. I think that it wouldn't exist without social media in the same way. But I feel like it's very fluid and not well defined. And that's part of the problem that we're facing right now, is that a lot of people have different ideas about what it is and what it looks like. And when we can throw that label on anything, then the waters get murky. So
Yeah, I think it seems like a mob rule thing in a way. And it's also a kind of how I can look, how I look in the public eye if you're canceling. It seems like some people, there's I don't know. There's a weird side effect to that where people seem almost forced to cancel other people sometimes in the heat of the moment. You know, the spotlight gets on you, and then people end up doing that. And I don't know if that would have been their intent if they'd had that time to do it over again. It's hard to say, but I think they're afraid. The way it is, that the fear of what can happen makes the cancel culture. It's like a negative feedback loop. It's terrible.
I would say that cancel culture is like the latest form of American exceptionalism. Like it's kind of this belief that the individual or like an individual person can like hunt down all of the problematic people and fix something that's like a structural and systemic problem.
So I agree with what a lot of you said. I think similar to what Lee said, a mob, like I say a mob of like moral monsters who really aren't seeking a public apology or like seeking for that person to change, but almost wanting just obedience from that person. Like they just want to control that person and disempower them. But with accountability, I think of it as while it takes someone to task, and when there might be a consequence that still needs to be like implemented and served, it still allows for that person like a second chance. It still sees that person at fault, but as a human. And so hearing your definitions and how I'm trying to define it, which changes every day, I can't honestly say that I've seen someone being held accountable for something. I think most of the people I named have just been canceled. But I'm wondering if you guys agree with that or not. Do you think that there has been cases where it's been justified on how the public reacted to them, and it wasn't really cancellation, but more of an accountability, like holding a mirror to them? Or do you think that most of the times it is just a knee-jerk reaction of you did something wrong, from like the most minute thing to the most extreme, and we want you done?
Yeah, I think like when you mentioned Terry Crews, because he gave some pushback against Black Lives Matter, but he still is on America's Got Talent, I think is his show. So like is canceling just you, like people saying that you're bad and then you have to go on, he went and talked to Don Lemon. Is that or Jimmy Kimmel got in trouble for saying something against Chinese people and then he made a public apology and he was moving on? Is that canceling? Because he still has his show. So I guess we have to understand, like, is canceling just like being called out? Because that's one thing, but then is it you lose your ability to earn a living? I would see that as something more extreme and probably more dangerous.
I agree. And I think that's why like we're having this discussion, right? Is because like there's this whole spectrum of things that are called cancel culture right now. And until we create that definition that can be applied or not applied, we can't really say like, is a person being canceled? Because I think you're right. Like if someone gets called out, but then there's no actual repercussions outside of their like 15 minutes of being played nonstop somewhere and like the false apologies that come along with it, or sometimes sincere ones. Like I don't want to necessarily put that always out there, but yeah, until we can say like, hey, this person legitimately was called out for something and canceled and their life is ruined because of it, it seems really difficult to make a case for it being like out of control, I guess, outside of like the media cycling this stuff repeatedly for us.
I'll just insert this really quick because it just came to my mind. I feel like cancel culture, I don't think they even think you're gonna necessarily, like I think with cancel culture and the mob, the hope is that you lose something. But I think most of the time it's more like we just want to disrupt your day, your life. We kind of want to ruin something about you because you said something that was offensive. So now we want to like take over a part of your life for a day, for a week. I don't know. But I don't even think people really think people are banished and exiled and we're not going to see them. But it's more of, I think it's a power play type thing. So
do you think if they could, that they would? Like, do you think if the group that went after Terry Crews, do you think if they could have completely ruined his career opportunities that they would have, and they just didn't have the power to do it? Like, is that what it is? Like, all I have is this, little butter knife, but if I had a machete, like your head would be off? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that, well, I mean, yeah, people were calling him a black supremacist. Yeah, I think people see it like my one voice can't hurt you, but a million of our voices can hurt you. Like, I think it's really just trying to hurt that person because that person hurt someone else in the public, whether it was directly at someone. Yeah, I think if people thought like every time we cancel someone and they're actually canceled, yeah, people would do it.
Yeah, I think it's very much like a public humiliation, like ritual of sorts. Like people are like, we invested all of this time and energy thinking that you're a good person and you've showed otherwise. And like now we're really upset and we're gonna like impose our morals onto you.
Okay, so we'll get into this more. It's a perfect transition for Pepe Le Pew. So this week, a cartoon that's been around since 1945, something I definitely watched when I was a kid, has now been called out for being problematic in regards to normalizing sexual assault. And a New York Times piece was the first to call this out. Then it was trending on Twitter where there was hardcore voices calling for its cancellation, but others supported Pepe and saying they believe it's an expression of freedom of speech. And also they didn't see the cartoon as a dangerous problem. And most recently, the producers of Space Jam, they announced that Pepe was going to be removed from Space Jam 2. But before we get into questions about this, I actually want to like do a little exercise and have us watch a 3-minute clip and just get our organic reactions of how we feel about it, and then we'll talk about it.
We shall make it together the drama mellow. The birth of a notion. The grand illusion. We will sail the sea of matrimony together. We will. This bayou, baby, is all right by me. All right, chérie, the courtship is over. Oh, the adoration. Oh, je vous adore. Je t'aime.
Okay, we see it now. Okay, so we just watched a 3-minute clip of Pepe Le Pew. And what did you guys honestly think watching that? No one's saying anything.
Well, I mean, it's not offensive at all from where I sit.
Yeah, Dave Chappelle, his stand-up special, I think was like over 20 years ago, Killing Them Softly, which is brilliant. He addressed this. He said like, oh my God, my little nephew was watching this. And he said, you know, Chappelle, so he's brilliant. And he was making fun of it, but like, yeah, it's like, it's crazy. And you wouldn't take that seriously. I saw a meme that said something like, get Pepe Le Pew off, my kid's too busy playing Grand Theft Auto where he just lit a hooker on fire. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's hard to say like, you know, it's gross. Yeah, it is. But that's the joke.
Yeah. Anyone else have feelings?
Yeah,
I don't think it looked like that back then either.
that.
Yeah,
part.
exactly.
Go
There's
ahead.
no way it looked like that back then.
What wasn't bad, right? Like what isn't bad about a lot of the media and cartoons that were made like back then? Like I think that's why I get kind of confused when people try to like attack individual characters, because I'm like, Tom and Jerry, like all of those things also got called out for, you know, having bad things, and it's because the people who were making them were people like living in the context where that was like a joke and like totally okay.
I want to insert this. There's been a lot of people that have said in regards to Space Jam 2 that they missed an opportunity, that instead of canceling Pepe from the piece, they could have had something written in where maybe Pepe is like, you know, my past behavior, what I did to like women, cat or whatever, skunks. I should have done that. Whatever.
Whatever I
hilarious.
did.
That's funny. But I mean, I would rather that than it be gone or like this be gone. Even though I will say, watching this, because when I saw this trending, I literally just closed my computer and was like, I'm done with America. Like I can't. But then when I looked back and looked at the clip, I'm like, okay, this is cringy, but it's like a marker of how far we've come. Like Lee said, when he looked at it back then, and when I was a kid, I didn't have this reaction to it. My question is, why are we trying to cancel Pepe Le Pew, a cartoon that about skunks or cats, whatever they are. But then we have shows like Games of Thrones. That's like, incest and all this, like all of these other shows that are normalize sexual assault. But why do you think we always hearken to the past all the time when our present is usually even worse?
Maybe for like the false hope of like progress. Like maybe people are like looking back and being like, this should be canceled again to like really convince ourselves that we live in a society that does value women and like take sexual assault and harassment seriously. Um, Although you could argue that's not the case, like, and that we still have the same issues we did back then. But I think it's like cancel culture. It's kind of just like again like moral superiority, like a moral crusade. Like we really want to stick with like we're better now. That's why we can cancel this thing back then.
Hmm. Yeah.
I think it's low hanging fruit too. I mean, it's just so easy. You could go, why not go after Bill Clinton? I mean, there's, Juanita Broaddrick and Jennifer Flower. I mean, there's so many. I mean, there's like legitimate claims there. What about Tara Reid and our current sitting president? I mean, there's a lot of things that you could go after and be like, okay, so what's going on here? But it's just Pepe Le Pew. What's he going to do? Like, there's nothing he can do. So it's just so easy. And I think that there's people would rather go for this easy thing rather than actually get into something that's real. We're so focused on Harry and Meghan, but what about, Prince, I forget the one who was on Epstein Island or whatever. Like there's a lot of issues going on here, but that's complicated. Let's go after Pepe Le Pew because that doesn't affect anyone who's in any kind of position of power. That's maybe my tinfoil hat, but I think that might play a role.
So,
How,
go ahead, Lee.
I was saying, I was just thinking, and I haven't seen this in a long time, but how was not Roger Rabbit called out in this thing? Wasn't the whole thing with him and that, what was the other one? That was just well worse than this Pepe Le Pew thing, I think, wasn't it? As far as the sexualization thing, it was like Jessica the Rabbit. That's the girl, right? And then the other one, it was like crazy, I thought.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I don't think it should be called out anyway.
Oh. So just to bunch all this up. So we also know Dr. Seuss, also read him when I was a kid. The family pulled 6 of the books because they felt that they were racially problematic and racially intolerant. And also the family called out Dr. Seuss for his older illustrations for being racist.
They are. And he was also an illustrator and stuff like that during World War II. And he did a lot of like very anti-Japanese type of images. So yeah, I mean, we were at war with them, but still, like, I think that playing up to the racial element when you're in war is a dangerous thing. So, but I mean, we're going back to 1940s. I mean, talk to someone who was around the 1940s. They're probably a little racist. I mean, it's just kind of the way that it is. I'm not excusing it, but there's just a way. It was a different time, and we have to bring in the context of time to try and understand this. Like, we're going to look back, our grandkids are going to look back and say, how did you allow this factory farming or whatnot? Like, how you're so immoral. It's like, well, I don't know. It was just what was normal. Like, I think that's where it's so tricky, is when you're going back generations, it's very tough to hold them up to today's standards.
And with that, I think we need, yes, those illustrations were racist, yes. But the difference here is the family is almost canceling themselves. So should people be mad, outraged by this? Is this, a attack against freedom of speech with like Pepe Le Pew and Dr. Seuss and other things? Or is it different when the person does it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's now like the accountability. Like, I think now that's like accountability, I don't really think is other people. Like, it has nothing to do with other people. Like, it's really just like what you decide to do as yourself. And so I think like instead of, focusing on the fact that like, yes, they're taking out these books that all of us kind of grew up with in childhood, like, why aren't we focusing on the fact that they, like, whoever in the family or the estate decided to practice accountability and like how, like, what that process was like for them, so that other brands, publishers, authors could learn from that.
That's a good point.
I was gonna say, but isn't the Dr. Seuss thing like you said, the family did it, and it's being misinterpreted, I think, too, right? I mean, there's people who I've seen on social media who make it seem like the cancel culture mob did it to Dr. Seuss, and my understanding is that's not what happened at
No,
all.
it's not.
It's like they did reflection, and this is what they chose to do, so which is fine. You know, they can do what they want to do, but it seems like that's even being misinterpreted by it's being painted in such a way that, like, well, the left has gone crazy again, and it's like, I don't think it had anything to do with the left or the right in this case. It's just what they kind of chose to want to do.
Jess?
Well, I was gonna initially say I think the Dr. Seuss thing and like the Pepe Le Pew or Kanye West thing are like apples and oranges, like for the reasons that people are saying, because they're two different scenarios. And that's kind of what I was referencing earlier when I was talking about like we need to really establish what cancel culture is, because I feel like it's completely responsible for a really long running brand to like reassess. I feel like, you know, people should be doing that every so often anyway. Like, okay, what did we put out in the past? Like, what can we do better? It's about reflection. And like, ideally, people should be doing that too, right?
That's
Going.
good. No, it's like, it's what you guys are saying about, and I didn't even think about it. No one is asking the questions about, I wonder what the accountability looked like for this family. What was the catalyst of that? Which just exposes cancel culture because it's not sincere. Also, and I'm just going to throw this question out because I'm sure people are thinking about it at home. Do you think cancel culture is more, it's obviously political. Do you think it's more of a left thing, or is it just a mix of everything?
No, I think it's both, because after Gina Carano got canceled by the left, you saw a whole bunch of conservatives saying, make sure you cancel your Disney Plus subscription on the right. So, you know, it's like, I'm not going to use this. I'm going to use, you know, this pillow company, not that pillow company, because so no, I think both sides do it, which is ironic because I think the conservatives always say that the left is so sensitive, but then I see them playing this very similar game.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you, Will. That's a really good, because I think it's a little bit different from the right, you know, and how they do it. You know, because it's framed differently. But you're definitely right. There's definitely evidence that happens on both sides. I think the left gets painted for way more, and I think the left's tough on their own people too. That's the other part, right? The left has this expectation that everybody has no imperfections, and that's just, you know, that's just not the way anybody is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, they got rid of Al Franken. I mean, they held up, and he was a good senator for them, you know, and they got rid of him.
Mm-hmm. So, lastly, and it's funny, I'm bringing this up. I have not watched The Bachelor since season 1, but this controversy with The Bachelor kind of exposes something else for me. And so I've been tuning into the commentary, the reviews, and stuff like that. We are constantly heard for the past decade about this concept of open, honest conversations. So I want to utilize this controversy with this. So first, actually, is anyone fans of this show? I just want to know.
My wife.
Sorry to do this to you. But first, I know for this, why not? So the controversy is because of 3 people: Chris Harrison, Matt James, the first Black Bachelor, and Rachel Kay, one of the final contestants in line to possibly be Matt's future wife. And with Rachel, she has started the controversy because someone found pictures of her attending an antebellum party in 2018, which these events historically took place during the same era as American slavery. Also, she liked photos on IG, Instagram of Confederate flags, things of that nature. And then someone has come out and has found tweets of hers where I guess she was making fun of her friends for liking or dating Black guys in high school. So that was a while ago. But Rachel has since apologized in a few videos, one on Instagram. But then Chris entered the backlash because he was accused for defending her behavior, basically saying in an interview, were antebellum parties really that bad in 2018, or is this something considered bad now in 2021? So that didn't go over well. And then Matt James, he actually got controversy on both sides. One, when he was silent, people were like, why are you silent? Why aren't you speaking out? And then when he did make a statement about being disappointed in Rachel's behavior, he got backlash as well. So first, what do you think about this controversy? More importantly, when we call for these open, honest conversations, especially about race, and then when people get open and honest and uncomfortable, cancel culture comes out, or there's a backlash that comes out. Do you think this is fair? Or is this a prime example that hinders progression with race relations? Because when people, no matter if it sounds off or not, when people are honest, they get backlash for it. But then we call for the honesty. So what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think that it's important to have open and honest conversations. I think it's a lot harder to do it like on a public stage, I think is more so the issue, because, you know, regardless, people are going to be filtered. Like, we have no idea if Chris, if Matt, and if Rachel like consulted with a PR person before they did their actions. Like, we literally just don't know. And so I think that it's hard to, you know, have open and honest conversations if, like, you know, like a million people might watch what you say. Like, it's just kind of impossible. If in private, I think it's possible, just because I think, like, you know, as a Black person and just living in this society with different kinds of friends and knowing different kinds of people, I've had like very tough conversations with non-Black people about the reality of the anti-Black racism in this country. And so it's quite possible, but like, I don't know if those conversations would have been fruitful if I was on like NBC talking to them, like,
Sure.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this reminds me a little bit. John McWhorter, the professor at Columbia, was talking about after the Jussie Smollett issue. He said this is a sign of how far we've come in racism that he had to make this up. And that's not saying that there aren't racist acts and there isn't hate crimes and stuff like that. But when you look at, this is a woman, first of all, from Georgia, which matters. Like, if she's going to like a picture that has a Confederate flag in it, they're all over the place. She went to college, I believe, in Georgia. So it's not, you know, having an antebellum party when you're in Massachusetts, that's a whole different thing. I'm from Pennsylvania. There were a lot of Confederate flags around because that's clearly you're racist. You fought for the Union. What are you doing? But this is a woman who's also madly in love, apparently, with a Black guy. So if you're calling her racist when she is in love with a Black guy, we're changing our definitions here, because I don't think that David Duke is madly in love with Halle Berry or something like that. Like, but the problem again is, you know, our friend Ibram Kendi puts it out there with this Kafka trap of, if you are accused of racism and you deny racism, that shows your racism. So like, she can't defend herself because she says, well, I'm not racist. I'm in love with this Black guy. I'm in Georgia. I like, you know, I have a bunch of Black friends. I've dated Black guys, whatever it is, but that's not good enough. And you're denying it, which just proves that you are racist. So this just seems like a real mess. And it seems counter to common sense to me, but I'm a white dude, and I don't see a lot of the angles that I think maybe some of you see, but it seems like it's going against common sense from my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I will just quickly input that a lot of masters loved their Black enslaved women and Thomas Jefferson was in love with his, you know, we know how that is. So just want to put that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like Louis De Palma says, lust is better than love. In Taxi, he was famous for that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it
Also,
gets in
I
the way,
don't
Brittany,
know
just
if-
like you said.
Oh.
It gets in the way of making things better. I do think it does, because you're people are not allowed to be honest, and they get punished for it. And I think Jediah said the exact right thing. I mean, you're not going to. It's so to be on television in a public sphere to do that has got to be really hard. Yeah, to do it one-on-one where nobody's recording it, that, you know, that can make it much easier. But I don't even think it's easy there. You know, it's hard because everything is so fragile. Feeling that you don't want to. You know, you don't intentionally want to do. I mean, sometimes there's intention, I think, for people, you know, like the people who stormed the Capitol, I think intentionally they don't mind acting in racist ways. But I think a lot of times when people, you know, who are want to do the right thing, want to understand the right thing. They're afraid to say what's on their mind because they don't want to be misunderstood for what they're saying, honestly. And they're not trying to be a jerk or anything. They're just trying to figure out what it is.
Mhm. Go ahead, Jess.
I was just gonna say that like it's difficult to really say that someone who signed up to be on The Bachelor is legitimately in love with another person because it's literally a reality TV show. And I feel like that a lot of the people that sign up for reality TV shows are in it to get their 15 minutes or to try to launch some other career that they're involved in. One of the few things I do know about The Bachelor is like historically a lot of those relationships have not lasted. And I just feel like that's an important part of this too. Like she willingly said, I'm going to be on a TV show. And I don't necessarily know that she knew from the beginning that she was going to be paired with a Black bachelor. But like if you're from Georgia and you have liked Confederate flag things and you have been to plantation parties, it's really hard for me to believe as a white person who spent a lot of time in the South in my childhood, who lived there for a while, that like you don't know. Like I signed up to be on American television, and people are not going to scrutinize me and that this couldn't be a potential problem. It just seems like really unlikely to me. And I do think it's valid to like say, okay, she had to have known about her past. I saw her apology. I don't think that I can't say if it was sincere or not. But the idea that like, oh, she's like in love with this Black dude and that's proof that she's not racist and she doesn't need to be held accountable for things she did in the past also seems like a stretch to me. And I hope somebody has something to say about that because
Yeah, I'm just curious. That's a good point. Pushback for me, but what would be proof? Like what would be what even hypothetical? What proof could this Rachel girl show for you to go, okay, she's not racist?
I mean,
to me, it's not about oh, sorry. Who was that?
No, please continue.
Oh, I was just going to say for me, like, it's not about her saying, like, needing to prove, like, in this moment, I am not racist. It's about saying, like, I perpetuated this. I did these things. This wasn't okay. And, like, yeah, I've learned my lesson, but, like, I caused harm. And, like, just owning that you caused harm and being willing to say that and say it not as a PR stunt to save your own ass, but to do it because like it meant something. And like if you really want to be in a relationship with a Black man, like move forward. Like what if they do get married and she has Black children? Like she's gonna have to answer for that someday. So it is more than just like oh, I'm sorry, you caught me. Like I think that the people who found these things probably did want there to be some learning experience, or at least I would hope so.
I thought she sounded sincere in the and to me, literally, based on what she said, I thought it sounded sincere. It was not that it has to be good enough for me, but it was I thought, of course, she was going out of her way to be sincere when she was saying, "Don't even feel sorry for me," right? I mean, I was totally in the wrong, but I mean, it's like what Will said. I don't know what else she could do there to show her sincerity other than that, and it was convincing to me. But then I didn't have an issue with that whole thing anyway. I mean, I had to watch all these videos that Brittany sent so I could be familiar with this situation. I heard a little bit about it, but I didn't know all the details of it at all. What she actually did. The thing I didn't know about the Confederate flag thing as much is when I saw the antebellum dresses, it just looked like Southern Belle dresses to me in that photograph there. There's nothing offensive in that, is there? Or did I miss something there? Because I didn't think that photograph itself was offensive at all. I mean, to me, that was a period dress kind of thing. And I mean, I'm not a fashion person, obviously, by looking at me, but I mean, I didn't find that offensive in of itself. If I wouldn't have heard the antebellum, I don't think I would have known that about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, some of the critiques were that is offensive. Well, that's the problem with offense. I mean, not the problem, but that's the reality of offense. Is it is subjective. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you just took a drink, or one of you looked at your watch, and I'm offended by that. That's real. That's real to me. So you can't hold your standards of what is offensive, and that's when they say like, oh, you're getting upset over nothing. It's like, well, that's not really the way that offense works. But yeah, people are saying that just the idea of being, antebellum, pre-Civil War in the South, we know what pre-Civil War in the South existed. If you were a black woman or a black man going to that party, it's like, well, where do I fit in 1830s Georgia? Like, let me think. Like that's a real thing. So I think that it is, even if it wasn't specifically like, slave, owning party or something like that, just the context of what it was, I think for some people is very offensive, and for other people it's not. So if you offend somebody, then you didn't mean to, then you apologize, because we don't want to. But in order for us to think and for us to interact in the world, this is a Jordan Peterson thing, but we have to risk being offensive. We have to risk being offensive if we're going to talk about anything with any kind of substance. It's tricky though.
I'll say, Jindai, do you want to say something?
Oh no, I mean I forgot because it was more so related to what you said at the beginning, but I kind of just, I mean, her apology itself did kind of sound more like genuine, because I think she also like had a page, like a post on her Instagram page or something, where you could like permanently see what she's done wrong, which is also like another thing too for accountability. Like I think if you're not quick to erase what you did, and you're like, no, this is what I've done wrong, and like I want you guys to see this. Like, I think that's a really a pillar of accountability. But also, like, I think that trying to like prove yourself as not racist as a white person is kind of like useless, because I think all white people like have subconscious bias and subconscious like racism. I think it's just more so like, are you engaged in trying to unlearn it? Like, are you engaged in trying to like make this world a better place for everyone? Like, I think that's more so like what we should be focusing on than like calling like a white person racist or not racist. Like that seems kind of useless to me.
Yeah, I couldn't say whether or not she was sincere with her apology. Like, who am I? But what I thought was strange for me was when I saw Chris Harrison's interview with the first Black Bachelorette. And then it seemed like a week later, or even less than that, he had this apology where he was like, what I said was wrong. It just sounded very scripted. But I felt like it probably was, and he probably felt pressured because of all the backlash he was getting. And that's the problem I have with cancel culture, is because we don't allow people to really think about what they did. We just want to hear you say sorry, and we don't even care if you changed inside. Like, we don't even care if you're really doing something to show accountability. So with his apology, I felt it was very like he had like a speechwriter. Not to say he hasn't looked back and saw maybe some things he said he shouldn't have said, but I felt like he was really pressured into that apology. But then also, when I looked at that interview a few more times, for me, I think that Matt James, obviously to me, picks her at the end. I think that's what's going to happen. And I think Chris Harrison, and I was just trying to be Chris Harrison for a moment, try to be a white man. It was very hard to do that.
Our life is hard, Brittany.
Lee, okay, so we're gonna have Lee off this. No, but for real, I seriously was watching it, and I was like, he has such a reaction to this. What is it? And I was thinking, you know what? I think Rachel is picked. Obviously, he knows about this months in ahead. Maybe he is thinking, she's getting all this backlash. She's being called racist. People are coming at her neck. I know, and I can't say it because you can't spoil the end. I know she's picked by this Black man. They're in love, and she's not racist. And I felt like that was where his emotion was coming from. So perhaps some of the things like saying, well, isn't Antebellum Party really bad? I don't even know necessarily if he would have said that if he didn't feel like, guys, she's with a Black man and this is the past. She's not racist, but he can't say that because he can't spoil the show. So I was thinking about that. But I do think that shutting people down quickly, and even with Matt James, him not saying something, him saying something, I mean, he got it too. And then people calling him, you know, all the types of names. One, people liked him for not saying anything against Rachel. And then when he did, people were like, oh, you're a coon, you're an uncle, like all the names. So it's like you can't win in this battle, no matter what race you're in, depending on what side you're on. So yeah. I guess one other question I have, Chris Harrison, I guess, lost or stepping away. People say he lost his job as a host after 20 plus years. You guys saw the video, you guys saw what he said. Do you think cancel culture, because he really kind of was canceled, lost a job, do you think they went too far? Or is this just a consequence of his actions?
I don't know if he lost his job. I guess I've heard some of that. I'm not sure all plugged in, but I think the problem with it is when they take that job away, the mob is who they're trying to satisfy on that. You know, will this be satisfactory to the consumers of this program? And I just don't know how you can answer that question accurately at all. I mean, I don't, you know, again, I'm not really plugged into this thing, you know, when it happened. And I think the worst thing he said that I thought in his first interview, you know, the one with the first Rachel, you said the first Bachelorette or whatever, is when he talked about 2018 and 2021 as being really far apart when they're really close together. But I also think she's pretty young, and maybe Will knows how old she is. I don't know how old she is, but I just think this whole, you know, what people do when they're younger thing is a goofy thing to do sometimes. You know, now granted, she's still young. She's pretty close to it, but a lot of times it's been hitting people who are much farther away from that. And I just don't know if that's a wise thing to do, because we've all done stupid things. And, you know, I just don't know if that's right to cancel somebody over something they did when they were a kid or younger. And I don't know, you know, again, I don't know much about her personally and how old she is or anything.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of
my,
go ahead. Well, I'm going to just cast this last question out, and I'm sure it's going to be, well, you can step in. But aside from Dr. Seuss, Pepe Le Pew, The Bachelor, aside from all that, just generally, do you think there's ever a line now in our culture with canceling people, holding people accountable, whatever you want to call it, based on actions done 5, 10, 20 years ago? Do you think there's ever a line? Because like we've all said, I feel we all do evolve. We all mess up. My God, if my life was documented on tweets, I don't even want to know. But do you think there's ever a line? Like for instance, I'll just give this example. Kevin Hart, I don't remember the year, but I guess he tweeted from that time, a decade in the past, some tweets, some homophobic tweets or jokes. And it was basically, if you apologize, you can still host the Oscars. If you don't apologize, you can't. It was basically that. And he didn't apologize and knew that consequence was not going to be able to hold or host the Oscars. Do you think things like that, do you think holding people accountable for things that happened a decade ago goes too far? Or do you think that this is good to do that so that people now think twice before they do something or say something?
I think everyone has their own lines. So to say like, what is the line? It's going to be different for all different people, but it's even tough because are people actually offended, or is this an opportunity to virtue signal to show how woke or how non-racist you are because you're calling them out? Like that's really muddled. You know, just when I was looking at cancellation, I just want to just throw this out there. Like Apu from The Simpsons was canceled because Hank Azaria, a white guy, did his voice. Scarlett Johansson got kicked off of a movie because she was going to play a trans person, but Hilary Swank won an Oscar, I believe, for the movie Boys Don't Cry, where she played a trans person just a few years ago. Apu is a very positive representation of an Indian character, and I'm friends with a lot of Indian people, and they talk to the Indian community like Indians weren't upset. They liked Apu. It's very interesting because then you cancel these people, and Scarlett Johansson or Chris Harrison. I think Chris Harrison earns the most money on television per word said. I think I read that somewhere. So he's fine. But
I need that
some
job.
people aren't. And when you cancel people, you remove them, you isolate them. Isolated people are dangerous people. And their ideas, they find other isolated people who don't have a platform, and they get on whatever Parler or something like that. And then those ideas just bubble and fester, where I believe sunlight is the best disinfectant. And when you cancel people, then if they're not multimillionaires in Beverly Hills, they just become more and more radicalized. So even if you are offended legitimately, you have to think like chess. You can't checkers this thing and say, oh, you're wrong, I'm going to cancel you. You got to think like, if I do cancel this person, if they are legitimately problematic, what will taking them off of social media do? What will having them lose their jobs do? Desperate people do desperate things. We saw that with the rise of the Third Reich in Germany. The German people were really, really desperate. So they turned to this radical person so that they could save them. So I just think that we have to think our way through this very carefully. And that's my biggest opposition to the cancel culture thing, is it's missed opportunities to grow and learn. And it's really flirting with dangerous ideas of putting already problematic people in a situation where they're just more likely to get worse and worse and worse. So that's kind of my overall take.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in terms of, I think you have to see like just like naturally, like have they changed? Like if in the like 10 years ago a tweet was dug up and like they said something homophobic, but now when you look on their Twitter, they're like very outspoken about LGBT rights. They advocate for the community, they say positive things, like, then what would really be the point of bringing up that tweet or canceling someone over that tweet? But like in Hart's case or other people's cases where it's like this old like problematic thing was brought up and there's not necessarily any evidence also in the present that your behavior has changed or your thoughts have changed, then I do completely understand why people are like, hey, like please address this, what are you doing? But what like Will was saying, like it is very dangerous also because like, yeah, if you're not a celebrity and you can't just like live life after being quote unquote canceled, like if you're just an ordinary person who has lost everything, been doxxed, sent death threats, whatever, then it's very unlikely, that you're going to be like, oh, wow, like let me positively reflect on this and see what I've done wrong. Like, no, you're probably just going to be like very angry and bitter about this thing for like most of your life. And double down.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when I think about this, I think about how canceling people really started on Black Twitter. And I feel like when it first started, because I looked into it a little bit, because I was like, didn't this start on Black Twitter, like the epicenter of popular culture, like where it all starts these days is what it seems like. And it seems like that it started as a way to like basically be like, we're going to support people who support us. But as things slowly diffuse out into the mainstream culture, like they tend to get bastardized, right? And similarly to how after the George Floyd protest, every company in America had their little blurb about how they were supporting reform against police brutality or like whatever, and how like every company seems to have a little blurb now about Black History Month and like uplifting Black voices. It feels the same with cancel culture. And I hate the fact that like it seems like we're attributing people trying to save their asses to like are in positions of power by saying like, okay, people are talking and what you need to do is you need to go out there and you need to make an apology, and like you were saying, we're going to write this up for you and you're going to say it and it's going to like make things better for you, and like you might have to lay low for a couple of weeks, but then you'll be fine, you'll get jobs You know, none of these people from what I see, like have truly been canceled in the sense that like their lives have been destroyed and they can no longer work or like whatever. It seems like something that blows over. And so I just feel like it's another way that like people in closer proximity to power have been able to, number one, like change the narrative and then push it back on people who are genuinely trying to liberate themselves and like raise consciousness. And then, so we're sitting here talking about people, how dangerous it is for people to basically be like, I don't want to support this celebrity anymore because they're saying things that harm me, when really it's like some guy who's like, I'm going to lose some money off of this, but like as long as we just put a band-aid on it, it's going to be fine. It's not the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel with what cancel culture has done, especially now, is like you said, it's almost just like BLM has almost just become like a safety pin for people. Like when safety pins were the thing, like I'm an ally, when these people might not know anything about BLM when it started, don't care. Putting BLM on my business saves me from being called out or for people questioning if I'm racist or problematic or whatever. So yeah, it actually inadvertently backfires on itself. It takes out the sincerity and progress because you don't have to do anything but say stuff. Who cares? As long as you put out there something that will save you, the cancel culture passes you by. So, but then accountability, it's almost, I'm still like, who, because we're all not morally perfect. So who holds the accountability? Like, why do we feel like we get to hold people accountable? If you get what I'm saying.
I was thinking along when Desiree and everybody was talking that ignorance should probably not be canceled. It should be educated. So I think intention, and this is, I remember where I worked a long time, and Brittany knows where this is. I don't want to mention the company's name out loud, but when all this kind of stuff started, you know, it was like Will was saying, it was intention. If you felt that you were hurt, then you were hurt, and it was treated as if it was a real thing. And I never really understood that completely, because there's one thing to intentionally do something wrong, but if you're not intentionally doing something wrong, I don't think that they should not be equated as the same thing. And that's one of the problems. We live in a world of false equivalencies where somebody intentionally does something wrong is equal to somebody who did something wrong and didn't even know they did it. And there's just no way that can be the right way to do that, to navigate that as a society. You know, and that's, if you ever went back and watched, and this is like my favorite show of all time, but if you ever watched All in the Family and watched Archie Bunker and how they wrote that character, I mean, Archie Bunker was ignorant. He was not hateful, you know, and that didn't make him a good person in society or nothing like that. But I tell you what, people who are hateful, that's a problem. Somebody who is ignorant, well, I mean, we're all ignorant of all kinds of things. And I don't know that you can hold somebody accountable for ignorance the same way you can hold somebody accountable for an intentional act. I just don't see how you can do that. And I think the problem with cancel culture is it equates those two things as if they're the same thing, and they're just not the same thing. That's the biggest problem I have with it, is they equates two things that aren't the same, in my opinion, and it's not right.
Well, one thing with that, how do you decipher between if someone intentionally was meant to offend someone versus doing it on purpose? Two,
well, close to zero, that may be hard to figure out, but there's times when it's super easy to figure out, right? Because like if you're walking down the street and you're an African American and somebody calls you the N-word, that's intentional. But if somebody is describing a situation, like reading something out of a book, and that word is in there, that is not the same thing. Yeah. And those two things are counted the same. And that is a problem, in my opinion. Intention is part of this thing, and we are totally ignoring it. And I'm not saying that it's okay to be ignorant. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we can't treat the two as if they're the same thing. Right. You know, that you just can't. And I think that we do that with that. And I just don't think that's the right way to go. And I think cancel culture is the result of that. because you just, somebody says something accidentally. Heck, I might be canceled after this. Not that I have anything, but you know what I mean? It's got to be more real than that,
That's fundamental to our judicial system too. I mean, if I'm driving in the snow, I lose control of my car. This happened to a friend of mine in college, and I lose control of my car, and I hit someone on the side of the road and kill them. The penalty is quite different than I'm going to try and steer into that person and kill them. And it has to be because of all this. So if we have structured our judicial system that way, even though that's public, like even on the private sector, like we have to at least recognize that importance of what you're saying, Lee.
Well,
recognize the importance. I agree.
Yeah. Just briefly, with someone doing something ignorant, racially ignorant or whatever, I do feel like holding them accountable isn't bad. With my definition of it, seeing them still as a human and giving them a second chance and just being like, hey, you just messed up. We're taking a task, but we're calling you in. We don't want to call you out. Like, I think that is good. But cancel culture, like, you did something really immoral and we're perfect, is freaking annoying. Like, I can't take it. But that's my take.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest problem is like people lack empathy, which is just like a greater problem in our society in general. Like people lack empathy, and people are because the society is based on hierarchy, right? Where white people, specifically white men, are at the top. It's like that's all of our that's just like programmed in our brain. Like we are constantly looking for positions or areas where we feel we're on top, or we feel like we're superior to someone, and like in a way, like that's why we all be canceled, because like in a way, like it's really just people so convinced that like, yes, like now this person is canceled, I call them out, like I'm above this person. Like it's really just focusing on being like above people, whereas if people had empathy and were just nicer, then maybe people would have actual opportunities to be educated about their actions.
Do you think that people don't have empathy, or do you think that the empathy is only directed in one direction? Like, do conservatives have empathy for the policemen who are out there risking their lives, but then screw up because it's a high pressure job? So that my empathy is for the cop, but then the liberals would say my empathy is for the innocent black kids who are being put in this situation and then harassed by the cop. Like, I think we have empathy, but it's like for our team, like our tribe's empathy, as opposed to like they're unfeeling, right? I don't know. What do you think?
I would agree with that, but then something that might negate that notion is the U.S. Capitol mob. When, I mean, that mob, would normally be like Blue Lives Matter, but then they killed a cop. So I think in the moment is where you align, and where you don't feel there's a threat, you have empathy for. Maybe because you feel like, well, that threat, so to speak, wouldn't have empathy for me. So yeah, I want to banish them and give them no grace.
That was definitely intentional, though. That's what intentional action looks like, is the January 6th thing, in my opinion.
Yeah. I want to wrap this up with something fun that I like to do. This is one of my favorite questions to ask people. If you could invite 3 famous or historical figures over for dinner, dead or alive, who would they be? I'll just start with mine, and usually I have 5 people, but I'll just say I would probably want James Baldwin, Lauryn Hill. Oh, Lord. Dang. I'll just say Dr. King. Okay, who wants to go next? Jess? No?
That's too much.
Do it, because
I need to think about it.
Okay, we'll go to Lee.
Well, I had the one I've always picked, and I didn't have 3, but I've always said Mark Twain is the person I would most want to meet, even though I have not read any of his books before, because I just think I think that him and I were probably a lot alike in the sense of how cynical and stuff. So I think I'd like to meet him and pick his brain on things.
Yeah, I think Jesus would be cool to have for dinner. Maybe Jesus and like Sam Harris.
Dang, why did I not
like
think
a
of
prominent
Lord?
atheist.
Oh my gosh. That'd be a very interesting little thing.
I'd like to be at that one with Sam, because I'm very familiar with Sam. So I'll take that one.
I would say Harriet Tubman, Maya Angelou, and George Washington.
Ooh, that's really good. Jess, it's up to you. This episode is all on you.
I've been doing a lot of research on like ethnomusicologists. So right now, I would say Zora Neale Hurston, this woman I just learned about today named Emma Bell. Oh my gosh, I can't remember her last name, but she was an Appalachian like ethnomusicologist and folklorist and writer. And then Alan Lomax is another person who went to great work trying to preserve folk songs and customs so that we could have them for posterity. And we could have some cool conversations.
That'd be awesome. I want to go to all of those parties. Thank you for the invite. Just closing words, just one person or two people, because this platform for me is to bring in different diverse people with thoughts and things of that nature to have conversations like this, tougher conversations as well. What would be your advice for people that want to have these conversations with people that might not politically align with them and they might be nervous? Like, what would you say to them?
Prepare to get your feelings hurt. Like both parties, I think like you'll be surprised. Like even if you are the person educating or teaching, like your feelings are still gonna be hurt. And it's okay. Like just acknowledge that you both are human, you both have emotions and feel, and that these are very heavy and sensitive topics. And just like have that grace for each other. Just be honest about it. Be vulnerable.
No, I agree. I agree a lot. I think finding that common humanity. Thought of these like pillars because I do this all the time, trying to talk with people that are different. I just say, I have it over. Intellectual humility. So you might be wrong. Like all of us, we might be wrong on this. Genuine curiosity. So like, what am I missing here? What am I missing? Like, and actually ask that question. And then, you said, grace. I think grace is really important. Just pausing judgment a little bit and looking for that common humanity. I think that's probably the best bet. I don't know. Best thing I come up with.
Yeah. So thank you all for tuning in to American Shade. Check everyone out. Also, does anyone want to talk about like where to find you social media? Or I'll just drop all the links in the description. Anyone? Okay, I'll drop all the links in the description box. Thank you for tuning in, and peace, love, less shade. Peace.
Thanks, guys. Nice to meet you all.
Yeah, nice to meet everyone.
Nice to meet everyone.
Nice to meet everyone.